Hello again, and finally I'm got to the fourth video of mastering an album. Now we are doing the final part of the mastering process, and we are going to recap what we have done in the last 3 episodes, and I will show you what I've done since then. And then we are going to go step by step through the final mastering stage, which is everything to do with review and analysis, process between mastering an instrumental versus one with lyrics. We are then going to do output mastering, and we're going to talk about effects modulation and EQ fixes, and then our final limiting process. And we're also going to talk about the render process. I'm going to start with that because I've already done a render, and you'll see what I mean in a moment. And we're also going to talk about distribution and how to go about doing that once you are done with your masters. All right, so let's get to it. All right, so here we are back into Wavelab, and if you remember, we were doing the Days of Ending, which is this track. And since we did the last video, I have changed a few things here and there, just a few EQ changes and a few little adjustments here and there. I think the main change I made was I slightly widened the low end a little bit. It did seem a little bit thin on the outside, and I brought it in a little bit, and then I shaped the sound according to how I wanted the song to be, and that was pretty much the main fix I did. So as a reminder, what we did so far is we started with a raw track, we embedded it, we put a meta normalizer, we finished our quality control, and we had embedded the metadata. We added frequency to get rid of some things we don't need. We de-essed it a little bit. We put a little bit of bus compression, a little bit of MS processing, and then we went through the master rig to mainly do the imaging, and then we also did a little bit of compression on the end. And then we put a little bit of multiband saturation on it, and so on. And then we did our first stereo EQ, where we brightened it up and took out a little bit of harsh frequencies around the 5K area. Then after that, we brought it back using the MS processing, made it a little bit bright on the sides. We made it a little bit bright in the middle as well, but we also put a little bit more low end in the middle and none on the sides. Put a little bit of saturation on these both sides and the middle. Pushing the input, bring down the output. It's a typical thing to do with a Neve processor. A little bit of reverb, 12%, and then we de-resonated everything, and then we went into the first limiting stage. Cool. So, and I've pretty much done that on every single track, and gone through every single track. Some tracks have things, some don't. For example, I think it was this one that I found this compressor was actually too much. It was compressing it too much, so I took it off, and it didn't need the stereo processing. Some tracks don't have MS processing like that one, and I think the last one, and so on and so forth. And just to put in perspective how long this track took us when we were on it was 3 hours. So I would say each track took about 3 to 4 hours. I took about 3-4 days to go through every single track. Another time-consuming thing is doing the mix reviews, revised mixes. If you remember, in our file we had original mixes of these ones, the ones we originally received, and then I have a whole bunch of revised mixes. And some tracks were redone, and we replaced all those audio files. Like, for example, this one, Daydream and You, was replaced, and things like that. Oh, you can probably see a little bit of a divot over there, and what I did there is I reshaped the sample. After processing, I found that there was one snare hit that was clipping a little bit. It wasn't clipping per se, but it was too loud for the rest of the song, so I rebuilt the sample. Essentially, I went in there, and on that little section by itself, I redrew the sample. What I mean by that is that I took the pen tool and I just lowered the sample. So, things like that happen sometimes, and you just fix them. So yeah, that is a recap of what we did. So this is the montage after our first round of mastering, and after we do this one, I now went to the process of rendering. I rendered out this montage into a new montage, and how to do that is very simple. You go to render. I'll just show you how to do this without preset. So essentially you choose what you want to be rendered. In this case, I wanted all the marked regions, which is all the in-betweens. You could render this out as one giant montage, like the whole thing as one song, and then keep the market tracks and then cut them later. But for me, I just like to keep it like that. And then you don't need to name your regions because we've named them already over here. So that will name them automatically. And then the file location, you guys know what that is. And obviously we're keeping it out as a wave, just default wave, not 24-bit or 16-bit, because we are not dithering yet. It's still a 96K render. And then the options is what's important here. We're bypassing the master section. We're not using the master section at all. So I'm just bypassing it. Not that you need to bypass it if you don't have anything. Like I have nothing on here, so there was no need to really do that, but I do it anyway just as a precaution in case it might pick up some random thing in there. Not that it would, but just in case it does. I copied the markers. Obviously, we want to copy them, and we create a new montage from the result, and then I bypass the master section of the resulting audio files. So then we press the render button. Obviously, this is a whole album. It took about 40 minutes, 30 minutes, somewhere around there. I didn't really count to render out the whole thing, and this is the result. We have the montage, and the markers are still there. And they're not staggered. I'm keeping them in line in this case, for no reason, just because I want to. And you'll see that the heal me is in green, and that's just because it doesn't affect me. I'm just marking it to show that I don't need to do anything on it. So you can see that it's already limited to -1 because this is the 96 render of the single, which I did the whole thing in one go. So yeah, and you can see now that it's quite even after the process. This one looks a bit loud, but it's not. It's just because there's some seriously quiet sections in between, and the final limiter will sort all of this out. If I go to our 96K renders, which are over here, let's just go type. And you can see all the tracks have been rendered. There's the single. There's the one. We can actually delete that. We don't need it, which I'll do later. But you'll see that this one is, this is the 96 render. If I bring up my audio tool here and we bring in the digital master, you can see it says the album name, the artists, the position. It says 1 at this point, but we'll change that a bit later, and so on and so forth. And if we go to another one of the 96Ks, like this one, you'll see that it's all there, and you see track 6 of 12, and all the metadata is now embedded. And if I play this in a media player, you'll see that the album cover comes up. There we go. And that's it. And that's why I like to do metadata first, so I don't have to worry about it a bit later. If you open up in iTunes, it'll show you all the other metadata as well. So fun things. If we go to artists, for example, you can see all the metadata comes up. Very useful. Okay, so now that you've seen how the metadata is embedded and all those wonderful things, the next task for us is to finish this master. We want the album to sound as consistent as possible. So the first thing to think about is we've now got this to a level where it's -15 across all the tracks. Obviously not this one because it's done, but it's -15 across the entire montage, and we want to get it to -14 LUFS for Spotify and for online distribution in general. There are some distribution places like I think YouTube or iTunes that have different LUFS levels. But -14 LUFS and a true peak of -1 dB is probably your best option at this point. But a general master is just you master it once and you master it as loud as it's going to be. That will be your master. And then on DistroKid, when you upload your music, you'll probably put on a normalizer. I'm not doing that because I want to show you how to control your dynamics. As you've seen, controlling the dynamics is actually very easy if you know how to do it. What we want to do is I want to get it to Spotify levels because I'm only going to do online distribution at this point. Later on, I might want to change this and then redistribute it, and you can do that on DistroKid. You can redistribute things. It does take like a couple of weeks to redo all the things, but other than that, it's perfectly doable. That's why you should only do this once. Anyway, to start off with, we know we're at -15. I'm going to actually get it to its final level to start off with. And before I do that, you'll see that we have no processing in clip, but we do have processing already on the output channel. This will do the entire output. And what I've put on here is the Oxford inflator. You don't have to put on the Oxford inflator, but what the Oxford inflator does, it kind of adds more body to the tracks without being compressed. It's got this kind of tube-ish sound, and it will glue your tracks together and also make your vocals cut through the mix a little bit more. It's just a really useful tool that we're going to use, that I'm going to use. If you don't have the Oxford inflator, that's fine. You don't need to use it. I just like it. It is a fairly pricey plugin, but you can get it. You can get deals from Plugin Boutique. You can go check that out as well. I might put a link in the description to, if you've never seen Plugin Boutique before. These things come up on special all the time. And it's a useful plugin to have. And all the Oxford range from Sonox is pretty good. I'm just going to use this one. So essentially how this works is that if you can push the input and bring down the output like you would press any type of clipper, gainer thing. Or in this case, we just use the effect control, and this will push up the amount of the effect that this thing creates. The curve will then just change the shape of where that, it actually tells you, modifies the processing characteristics of the effects. Yay. So why I put these on here first and didn't show you this before is because it takes a bit of tinkering to get it to the level you want it, and this does push up the level, which will kind of mess up the -15 LUFS thing. So just so you know what it sounds like by itself. Now you could use something like a compressor to get the same kind of effect. What I mean by that is, let me just bypass both of those for now, and let's put on a compressor. And I'll just use a standard compressor from Steinberg, something interesting. It's a vintage compressor for some reason. And we are going to leave it on 2 to 1, and I'm going to make it super slow, super fast, like you would a bus compressor. And then I will bring the mix out and get this up to about 10. Those wasteful lies hiding behind. And then you just push it in very slightly, 5-10%. In the memory, it won't be the last thing I say. It won't. But it does add a little bit. It's parallel compression, that's what that is. But it does add a little bit too much compression for a song like this, so you'll have to compensate it in the previous montage. So that's why I prefer using the inflator. Just makes your job a lot easier. Cool. So what this is set to is how I like it. And then I also bring down the output to get it back to -15, which I have done already. And that's that. So once that's on, then I will get through my limiter, and I'll get onto my limiter. Now you can use any limiter. I'm just using the Sonable Smart Limiter just because it's got the Spotify section. It's got some quality checks and things like that. If you remember, we got it to -15. Even after the Oxford inflator, I've pushed down the output to get it back to -15. And now I will set my true peak level, which is -1, and I have then pushed the gain up by 1 because I was sitting at 15, push it up by 1 decibel, -14. Woohoo! And I'm using the metal preset. That doesn't really matter in my personal opinion because I will change the parameters down here, but I had to use the smart function to be able to do that, so I'm doing that. So if you don't have the smart limiter, you can use a regular limiter and then add all these things as you want. That parallel compression thing that I showed you earlier would be this kind of style, hard, soft. You can also set that on your limiter if you use a standard limiter. If you just use the limiter from Steinberg, the same thing goes on here. You would check your release time. I like to have my release time a little faster than that. And I will push the output down to -1 and then push the input up to get it by 1 decibel increase. The other things that add is saturation. So if you want to add saturation, simply you add a saturator of any sort. In this case, it has a 0 and 100, and I'm assuming it's some form of tape saturation, kind of, or tube saturator. So what you can do is just grab a saturator and then adjust it however you want to do that. And there's our bass release as well on this Magma. Oh, by the way, this is a wonderful saturating plugin. You should probably get it. Just because it's great. And it's Wave, so you know it's on perpetual specials all the time. You also have this bass control over here, and over here you have the same thing. Bass control, bass relief. So very useful. You can shape the sound as you want it. So you don't need to have the fancier plugins to do what I've done here, but it does help and makes your job a little bit easier. You can do this all with stock plugins and get a very similar result anyway. So that's my first stage. And now one thing I do slightly differently from probably a lot of people is that I'm going to select a track that I want to use that represents the entire album. And for me, it's this last one that I've been playing. That's why I've been playing it on this one. And I will then set the output and treat it as I would a clip effect to get this to how I want it to sound. And the reason for that is that I'm going to then render this out as a reference for the rest of the album. I'll give this a listen and I will decide if I want it to be brighter, I want it to have more impact or something like that. But the main job is pretty much done. And it's sitting in -14 LUFS for these two. So I have my Oxford inflator. And now what I'm going to do on the inside between the limiter and the inflator is I'm going to put on an EQ, and I'm going to use Isotope Ozone Equalizer. Now you can use any equalizer. I'm just going to use this one because it has two functions. It's got analog and digital, and you can also choose whether you want it stereo, MS, left, right, transient, sustain, whatever. I'm not going to use any of these things here. What I want to do is shape the sound of this track to how I want it the final sound to be.
About a time so long ago, it pains my heart to see those wasteful lives hiding behind a memory. It won't be the last thing I sing. It won't be the last thing I hear. Please take dreaming of a life well spent. Remember a time of love and freedom before silence reigns. Your time for redemption is done.
Okay, that sounds all right. There was just a couple of things I didn't like there. And quite honestly, I think that'll do. I don't think it needs any more than that. And that's pretty much it. Wonderful. I'm happy with that. What I'm going to do now is play through the whole thing and just make sure that it is at -14, because this will be now my reference track that I am going to use for the rest of the album. So I'm going to now listen through the whole thing again, make sure it's at -14, and then I will render it out. Okay, I found a little bit of a mistake. Not a mistake, but something that I don't like. If you listen to this piano over here, you can actually hear there's a little bzz, bzz, bzz happening. And for me, I don't like that sound. I want this piano to be a little bit cleaner. And that's probably come from the saturation in the previous montage. So what I'm going to do is show you how to use automation to automate these things to get them out. So because it is the clip itself, I'm going to go onto my clip, and I'm going to get myself an EQ. Yeah, I can use frequency. Let's do that. So let's get frequency. I like frequency. It's a nice plugin. Frequency. And what we want to do is isolate that buzzy sound. So I'm just going to loop this area and just see if I can find that buzzy sound, which is somewhere in the high frequencies. That. Haha. So what I'm going to do is cut it out. Absolutely. Okay, so that's got rid of that. And I want to automate this in. So I'm going to keep that on. Now, to do automation in Wavelab is a bit of a tricky business. I'm not going to lie. If you look over here next to frequency, we have the automation envelope. And if you click here, it will give you the plugin, and then it gives you this crazy list of 231 different types of things you can do. And for me, that is crazy. And it's I think in the next version of Wavelab, they need to figure out how to make this a lot easier, because it's just wild. So the easiest way to do automation is to go into the plugin itself, and you can right click on any parameter. For example, we can right click on that, and it says create clip automation envelope for EQ7 band on. I'm going to do that. And now it's created that automation, and I am going to make sure it's on, and you can see the visuals now. There's the levels, and there is the frequency band, which is actually quite a cool way to visualize your automation. And at the moment, it is on, and I want to turn it off when the singer comes in. Cool. Where Dream comes in, because once he starts singing, he masks that sound. So very much like the volume thing we did in the previous one, we can put in a marker, and I'm going to put a marker next to it and just drag it down. And now it is off. So now, and I don't think we need it in the beginning either. Because it is taking away from that choir a little bit, even though it might be very little, it is taking away from it. So I'm going to just get to the beginning of the transient on this piano. And then I'm going to bring it down. Same with this one. Boink. So now it's just automated that area. And it should, if I go here, turn it off. Haha.
dream about.
All right, cool. So that's how you do automation in Wavelab. It's fairly simple. Just don't use that. The one problem that I find that is a bit annoying if you do something like the master rig, if you're using the master rig, automating this to bypass is not fun. That button, you can't right click on it. So to get it to automate, you'll have to go through the entire process. So EQA bypass, right? You'll have to go master rig, and then you have to find the thing. And you get my point. This is why I don't like this menu diving system. I think there is a much easier way to do it there. Menu, EQA 7. That's probably the 7th band. Yeah, you get my point. It's a bit of a mission to find it. That's why I don't suggest doing it this way. Cool. So now we have got this track. We are now going to render it out, and we got to use it as our own reference track. So I'm want to play through it, make sure the level is all right, and then I will render it out, and I'll then use it as a reference track. Awesome. So after all of that, we have got to minus 14 LUFS, and we've got to negative 1.1 true peak, which is not entirely true, because if I look on my output meter from Steinberg on my other screen, it says negative 1.07. So if anything, it's just rounding up, which is fine, I guess. I mean, the true peak level is kind of a weird one, in my opinion, but I'm not going to go into that conversation. One thing just to keep in mind, remember I said I'm mastering for Spotify. I can now check the quality control. It says I want to increase the input gain to reduce the dynamic level. The dynamic level sitting at 12.6 LU. Personally, the dynamic level should probably be around 8. But because this music is so highly dynamic, it goes super quiet and super loud, almost like classical music, I don't really care for that. And what we're going to do now is render this particular thing out. So I'm going to go selected CD track. Let's go with that. Selected CD track. And that's it. And I'm going to render this guy out. Now that we have it rendered out, we can now use it as a reference track for the rest of the album. And the reason I chose this particular song is because it's got quiet sections, it's got loud sections, it's got a down chorus and up chorus, and it's got both voices in it, so I can reference it with both singers in it. Let's do that. Let's go get it. So again, you could use the standard reference track that you get and use it that way, but I'm going to use my reference software, and I am going to go grab that Daydreamer reference, open, and there it is. Just for interest's sake, remember I said in previous videos that this doesn't, I don't use this as a visual tool. I use it as an idea and then use my ears to determine the sound, because even if I play the same track over the same track, it does not sound the same. So for example, if I play the last chorus, same area.
Take me back, yeah. Take me back to a time worth living, dreaming of a life well spent. Remember a time of love and freedom before.
It vastly changes, depends on the section. Obviously, I'm playing exactly the same part over itself. So the next and the most time-consuming job is now we're going to use this reference track. We are going to go through every single track, and we are going to make notes on what needs to be done. I am going to go do that, and I will be back shortly. Most of the issue I found was there was not a lot of mid-range in a lot of things, like reinforce the low mids, more low mids, low mids. Many of the tracks have low mid issues, so we're going to fix that. I think the most challenging track I have, the one we actually did, Remember Your Pledge, it was slightly left bias on the backing vocal, and the mids need to come out more opposed to the side. Okay, so just so you know what I was listening to, I listened to the track with the references itself and different sections of the reference, and then I also heard the interchange between the in the coming in of the track and the going out of the track to make sure it flows. So let's have a listen to what I mean. Here's the out of a track going into the next one.
Me out! Wake up! Wake up! Wake up!
That's absolutely fine. For me, at least, it is. And so on and so forth. So, at the end of each track, I see how it flows. Most of them flow absolutely fine. It was just that first one that's bad. And also just remember the gap between here. The track will end there and start there. So this little gap is actually adding a little bit more than it's supposed to, but it's fine. Now we can start on with the actual part of finalizing this master. So the first, I think the easiest one to do, weirdly enough, is this one, the longest track. All it requires is a slightly thicker low end and more bass punch. That's pretty much it. So if I go into this track and we go play a section of it, like here for example. Now this is an instrumental section, so we are going to play an instrumental bit, which is this one, I think. And you can hear there's a bit of a lack of low end happening over here. We just need to determine whether it's in the middle, on the sides, or it's stereo. So let's have a listen.
For the first time.
Honestly, I think it's just stereo, so I'm just going to get myself the equalizer, and I am going to reinforce that low end. It's around the 200-ish area.
For the first time, I have a reason to wake. A new day, a new start. I need to part in whom I confide.
Cool, it also needs a bit of low end, so what I'm going to do is get myself a multiband, and I am going to just bring out that low end.
For the first time, I have a reason to. For the first time, I have a reason to wake. A new day, a new start. I need to find my counterpart in whom I confide. Is this real? For tears of war. Or in the
Okay, now that I have boosted up that low end, even though it says I should boost it more, I don't think it should be boosted more because it'll just become really muddy. And what has happened is from that multiband compressor, I think with the crossover, it's created a little bit of a mid-range weirdness.
my tears of wanting and despair deeper in the chasm of my mind. I fall.
song is a bit of a crazy. Anyway, cool. So that's fine.
Is this really true? Fallen angels in the last of the deeper in the chasm of but then I fall.
And that's pretty close. I think that's absolutely fine. You notice that it was mainly just EQ I did. The one thing I do want to do is check that imaging on the left and right. It does seem to be a little bit biased to the left. I'm just going to use the standard tool, which is going to be stereo tool. And I want to bring in the left mid gain. I'm going to bring it down by 0.2 of a decibel, negative 0.2. And that should fix that little misbalance.
Was a boy who woke up one day. Takes it's really true. Dreaming leaves disguise perfect. Remember through my face takes me to the
That sounds pretty good. So the main task here is the very nitpicky things. It's mainly going to be EQ problems, and it might be a left-right bias issue. And then I'll go through this and make sure that, I'm not going to do it now, but I will go through the whole thing and make sure it's alternate minus 14. Let's do another one. I'm going to do the instrumental track because I think it's just slightly different. So here's the instrumental track. And now we want to have an instrumental section that makes sense. So let's go with this one. For me, what I have in my notes is that it's a tad too wide, and I think it still is. So I'm going to grab my the S1. You could use the stock plugins as well, and I'm just going to narrow this. I also feel like that kick drum is slightly to the right, so I'm going to rotate this. Cool. Yeah, it was strangely enough not in the center. So I've now moved it into the center. I think that one's done. And then the low mids need a little bit more thickness. Again, it's just a low mids thing. And I do this after the wider because the wider will affect the phase of everything. So I will then get myself an EQ, and I'm going to then just keep this in stereo. And then at the 200, 300-ish area, I'm just going to bring it up by half a dB. So you get the idea. I did a little bit of EQ. In this case, I'm checking the left and right ratio to make sure that it is balanced left and right. and also matches the rest of the album like that one. When I mean balance, I mean a little bit. I changed it by 0.1 rotation. Cool. So those two, I think, for me are done. I will do the rest and then come back after I'm done with that, and I will show you what I have done. All right, so I'm back. And at this point, we have done processing on every single track, and all the tracks except for Heal Me, which is called Heal Me Point D, just because it's a duplicate and we're not going to use it. It's just going to be deleted a bit later. But our main task is now done. We have done a master on the entire album, and it's all sitting at -14 LUFS, which is good. But just to put it in perspective, this took quite a long time, and it's because my ears got tired. And if you do this for a very long time, you can do 3 or 4 or 5 tracks, and then you stop hearing things that you should be hearing. So yeah, it took an extra day for me to finish it. Anyway, and let me show you what I've done quickly. You can see that we've done some EQ on this one, and I've also used the Oxford inflator again, but not as drastically as the previous one. And I've also used this as a gain controller to get it to -14, so we pushed it up, and then I brought down the output to -1.65, which will get us to -14. And on track 2, we did something similar, except I also used Ozone Elements, which is a great little tool. And the reason I use this is to tone match exactly to the reference track. And I did this by using Isotope Lens, audio lens, which will give me a target level I'm going for, and then I can go to the custom target and go select it. I used Let Me Out, which is the previous track 1, and it will learn that function, and then it got to that target. And then I used some EQ to cut out some harsh frequencies in the high frequencies in the high register that the elements created. I also lowered the maximizer because I wanted to maximize it myself, and then I made it a little bit narrower. Same as before, it was a bit too wide, so I just narrowed it, and I then used the inflator again as a gain controller and to give it a little bit more effect, and I used the curve without the band split to give it a little bit more bass response. But it does do a little bit, and I quite like it like that, and I used the gain control to get it to the right level. Track 3, we did pretty much the same kind of thing, and what I'm going to do is play a few snippets of everything.
What is this? I'm so relieved. This glowing flame comforts me. I feel its heart, and I'm moving closer for warmth and shelter. A villain, a vicious patriarch, a monster inferno binds me. be the last thing I see. It won't be the last thing I hear. Take me back to a time worth living, dreaming of a life well spent. Remember a time of love and freedom before. Take me back to a time worth living before the end of the line.
Right, so now we have to get to the exporting of this entire thing. But before we get to the export here, we have to check something. And if we look in the folder where the master is and now bounces, we see that we have a 4824 wave, which is what we need to bounce it out as. And currently we're working in 64-bit float or 32-bit float. And
To the edge of my life.
32-bit float. So we have to dither it down to 24 bits. And to do that, we will use the dither that we have spoken about earlier, but let's go through the actual process. So in the dither, we got to open up, it's already got auto blanking on, and it's active, and we got to get it down to 24-bit and activate it. And if we open up our bit meter, we can see what it does.
A figure draws closer, cloaked and veiled from my side.
And you can see that it's cutting the bit depth down from 32-bit float or 64-bit float, depends on the track, to 24 bits. What does this do? It just puts it in the settings ready for distribution. And what bit depth does overall is that it determines the overall dynamic range. But that is a lot of theory that I am not going to cover now. Now let's look at the render itself and what it's got to do with the bit depth itself. If we look here, look in the preset sections, you'll see that we have Wave 24-bit encoded, which is one we're going to get. And we are going to then apply 24 bits to the entire track. And now that we've done the sample rate conversion, we can put it in the right folder, which is going to be in our bounces and our master file under 24-bit wave. So we select that. And then you can also check out the scheme. You can choose any of these things like RSOC or numeric prefix. For me, I will probably use numeric prefix because I have labeled my tracks track 1 to 12. But in this case, it doesn't really matter because we've got to upload it online anyway. So after that, we can look at the options, and I'm going to create a new audio montage from the results. And this is because I want to show you what it looks like after the render is complete. I'm not going to do anything else because it's not necessary. Certainly not bypass the master section because that's where our dither is. Okay, so our dither is on. But just remember, we need to get this to 48 kilohertz samples. So we have to resample this. There are other resamplers you can use. I think some people prefer to use external third-party resamplers, but quite honestly, the resampler inside Wavelab is absolutely fine. So you just turn it on and you see where you want to resample it to. So this will resample it to 48 kilohertz and at 24-bit. So we are now at the correct standard for distribution. And now we're going to start rendering. All right, and this is the final master. And they all look pretty much the same, except for Heal Me. I've replaced this audio file with the original single, and I did play through it to make sure that it does sound consistent, and it does. So I'm not going to try remaster it for this album because it sounds absolutely fine. That's the wave bounce. That's absolutely fine. And if we go into the file Wave 24, it's re-imported them, so that's where they are. Here is the whole album that we're going to send through for distribution. Excellent. The last thing we got to do is export the MP3. To do the MP3, firstly, let's check if the translation between the MP3 and the wave is going to be fine. And the easiest way to do that is using an encoder check. Under the playback processing, I'm going to go into Steinberg and look at the encoder checker. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get a encoded MP3, and I'm going to sit at MP3 at 320 CBR, constant bitrate at 320. That's the highest MP3 you can get. There's a big argument between CBR versus VBR. Personally, CBR got a bigger file size, but the quality is a little bit better. VBR, or variable bitrate, is a smaller size, but the quality is not as good. But this is for sound. For video, it's most likely going to be the other way around. It depends what you're doing. But I always make my MP3s 320 CBR. And if I now go play a track, like this one, for example, let's just downsample it to 44.1, because, of course, this is a MP3, and we play it. The red bit represents the constant bit rate of the MP3, and the green is the original signal. So that is pretty good, and I don't think it's going to do very much in terms of the difference between the MP3 and the WAV. It will be different because it is an MP3, but that's okay. Cool, and then obviously we are going to change the preset now to a encoded MP3 at 320 constant bit rate. And we're going to change the file location to instead of having it in the 4824, we put it in MP3. That's it. Go select, and then we render. And what we're going to do now is go through the distribution process. Okay, in distribution, there are many, many different distributors. There is a DistroKid, there is CD Baby, and there's TuneCore. These are probably three of the biggest distributors you get, and quite honestly, they all do the same thing. They get your music onto wherever they're going, and that's it. So you can choose which one you want to use. Honestly, it doesn't make a difference to me. They all do the same thing, and they all have different packages. I like DistroKid more, I think, because it actually shows you the three different packages you get and exactly what you're getting out of it. And if you go with DistroKid, you get three options. Essentially, you get the best value for I love how they say that. I don't know, best value for what exactly. You get the Musician Plus and you get the Musician. So the Musician, most people will probably just go for this if you're doing it by yourself. If you're me, you would either go for Ultimate. This used to be called Label before they changed it. For me, the Musician Plus is perfectly fine. And this costs $24 per month. Mine's set in rands. No, I lied, $24 per year, which is absolutely fine. This is a lot more expensive. However, what they don't tell you is that there's a lot of other expenses within this entire thing. But why I like the Musician Plus, you get two artists, which is me and maybe someone else I want to manage. Most people aren't labels, so they don't need to get 5 to 100 artists. And you get pretty much all the things you need. The main things you require is unlimited uploads and the daily streams. That's the one that I like to see. The statistics. Here you can't see the statistics on the label, but quite honestly, that doesn't really matter. But you can get the statistics on here, and that's it. But the one thing the label does offer is you get Context 2000 of playlists. Getting on a playlist in Spotify is probably very useful. But quite honestly, even if you have the context, getting onto those playlists is not as easy as doing it. Anyway, if we go to upload music, it's going to ask you to upload to where you want. Pick all of them except for I don't have Snapchat because I don't have Snapchat because I don't care about Snapchat. Number of songs, I'm going to do an album. In this case, it's going to be 12 songs. And your artist or band name, I'm going to put my artist or band name in there. I'm already on Spotify, already on Apple Music, already on YouTube Music and Instagram and Facebook. And we'll get into that a bit later. When do we want to release it? We set a day. For me, it is November, and I'm going to do next week Friday, which is the 17th. Cool. So 17th. The reason I set the date for the release so far in advance is this usually takes, if you've done it for the first time, if you're doing this for the first time, it actually takes about 4 weeks for it to go through everything. If you do it the second time, it usually takes 1 to 2 weeks. That's why I've set it for next week, Friday, which is approximately 2 weeks away. Pick a genre. Now, this is a bit of an annoying one because it doesn't actually have every genre in here, which is a bit annoying. The music we listened to in Wavelab, and it's like the symphonic rock, symphonic metal thing, but unfortunately that doesn't exist in here, so you have to just choose the closest thing. Album cover, you select your album cover. Easy. Even though we have the metadata already built in, we will then select the album, art, and I'm going to choose the 300 by 300 art because it has to be in a certain criteria, otherwise it doesn't accept it. I think this is 3000 by 3000. Yep, that's the one. So that one, doink. And then the title of the album, and then you name every single track, which takes a very long time. So I'm not going to do that now. But the one thing I want to show you is why this gets more expensive. Dolby Atmos. Yes, I have Dolby Atmos mixes for some of these things. I have versions mixed in Atmos. I'd like to do an addition. It's an additional 500 Rand, or it's another $24 for just uploading a Dolby Atmos mix each. So we go 24 times 12. It gets to quite a lot of money. So you can see where this gets very expensive. So the discovery pack, add an album global database to match the information. Yes, you should have this. And luckily you only have to do it once per track, and it's very cheap. 17 Rand is less than $1. It's about $1. The YouTube ID, you must have this, unfortunately, because if you don't have this, it's going to, you're not copyright protected on YouTube. So there's that problem, and some people can just take your own music. Loudness normalizer. If this is why I'm mastered to in Spotify. Again, they want -14 and -1. And this is why I specifically mastered for Spotify, because you have to pay for the normalizer. That is the distribution process. And once you have distributed your music, then you have to go through the entire process of syncing everything together. What you would do is you would go to your menu and you want to go to Special Access and get Spotify for Artists, Apple Music for Artists, Tidal for Artists. That is a mission. Linking your YouTube official channel as well to make sure it goes through into your channel so you can monitor everything. All of these things you need to do. The other thing is, if you've done a music video, you could also upload a music video over here. If I have a music video, it goes onto Apple Music, Tidal, and all these good things as well. So once you've done all of that, then it's as simple as syncing all your things together. For example, if we have YouTube creator tool, it goes to the channel. You will be able to see the music video for Heal Me is over there, and it is copyright. And that's exactly what we're going for. And you get the idea. So you'll sync everything together, and it does take a very long time. So those 4 weeks where you do upload your music, be warned, you got to use them to get all your distribution done. All right, that is how you would go about mastering an album all the way from the beginning to the end, going through the distribution as well. Just to keep in mind that I think there's about 3 million songs that get uploaded every month. So if you're new to this, I wouldn't bother paying for all the additional extras that might get you more streams and stuff. The best way to get streams, if you want to go do this whole streaming thing, is to promote your video yourself. It is a time-consuming process, but that is the joy of it. So thank you very much for watching, and if you would like to listen to how the album sounds later, you can go onto Spotify or iTunes and you can go listen to this music. And that would be very nice.